Put one piece of tubing through the lid with 2 holes. Slide the tubing all the way down into the bottom of the jar. Tape the tubing to the inside of the jar to help hold it in place. This jar will serve as your reservoir jar. It will replicate the oil or natural gas reservoir. Place the other end of this tube into the water bottle or other container. This water bottle will serve as your production bottle. This is where your recovered natural gas and oil will end up. Insert the second piece of tubing about 5 centimeters through the second hole in the lid for the reservoir jar. Insert the other end of the tubing about 5 centimeters into the lid with 1 hole for the empty mason jar. The jar with 1 hole in the lid will serve as your CO2 injection jar. This is where you'll generate carbon dioxide either using effervescent tablets or dry ice. Secure the tubing in both lids with sealant. If time permits, allow the sealant to dry prior to executing the experiment for better results. Fill the reservoir jar with marbles, rocks, and/or sand. Leave about an inch of open space at the top of the reservoir jar. Add 150 milliliters of oil to the reservoir jar. This represents crude oil stuck within the rocks below ground. Fill the remainder of the space in the reservoir jar with water, being careful to fill only up to the top of the rocks, marbles, or sand. Dye the water with food coloring if you desire. Secure the lid with 2 holes on the reservoir jar tightly. You can pinch off the tubing and gently rotate and mix the reservoir jar at this point. Pour water into the CO2 injection jar. Make sure that the water line does not pass above the tube. Make a packet for the 6 effervescent tablets out of a single piece of tissue paper and twist it closed. Holding the lid setup of the carbon dioxide injection jar close to the mouth of the jar, quickly drop the tissue paper packet into the CO2 injection jar. Immediately secure and tighten the lid of the CO2 injection jar. The tissue paper will get wet, permitting the tablets to fizz. You can swirl the jar around gently to encourage all of the tablets to dissolve. Be prepared for the production bottle to start filling up with recovered oil and water from the reservoir. If the pressure isn't high enough to push the oil from the reservoir jar to the production bottle, you may need to problem solve. Start by looking for any holes or bubbles that are fizzing up at those seals. You can reseal them with the sealant or hot glue. You can also look at your CO2 injection jar, lower the water level, and maybe consider increasing the amount of effervescent tablets. Once my equipment is airtight, the gas released in the CO2 injection jar pushes through the reservoir and pushes all of the water and oil through the tube into the production bottle. After the added pressure pushes all of that oil and water into the production bottle, you can see that the oil separates to the top since it's less dense. This oil can then be gleaned off the top and put into production.